Readers, listeners, welcome to the Foxed Page, where we dive deep into the very best books. You'll come away with a richer understanding of the text at hand, all while learning to read everything a little better. I'm Kimberly Ford, one-time adjunct professor at Berkeley, best-selling author and PhD in literature. I am so pleased this year to kick off 2026 with something else that is entirely new. Recently, I started doing some shorter podcasts that are mostly about language, actually, but are really about these concepts that get stuck in my head. The other thing I have been wanting to do for a long time and that we are diving into in 2026 is the idea of tackling one very short story during the course of one lecture. At first in my mind, I was like, we could do any of the short stories. I'll read the whole thing. We'll really dig into it. And then, of course, I realized that would be like a 4-hour-long lecture, which is not what we're going to do. What I realized is I have to pick something that is very, very short so that we can really read the whole thing, experience the thing in its entirety, but also have enough time to really dig into what makes it so magical. It seemed like a very good idea to start this off with a writer who I think a lot of us know for her short fiction, and someone who just is so appealing, and someone who really has had a lot of critical acclaim, someone that we have not looked at yet in the lectures. And I like how I'm saying this very coyly, as if you don't know who I'm talking about. But of course, the title of this lecture is letting you know that we are talking about Jamaica Kincaid. I discovered Jamaica Kincaid in college. I think it was some sort of women's studies course, which is interesting. I didn't take a lot of English literature or American literature. Of course, Jamaica Kincaid is from Antigua, although from the time she was 16 on, she lived in the United States. But when I was a freshman, we read Annie John in an early women's studies course that I was taking. That was a short novel that came out in 1985, and I loved it so much. I have such a clear memory, actually, of that freshman course because at some point, obviously this was not for the women's studies course, but at some point Saul Bellow came to campus, and I went to Dartmouth College, which was a place where very famously you can be like in very close proximity to these very important professors, and you have speakers who come and talk to very small groups of people. So I was very excited. I had read nothing by Saul Bellow, and I went to the talk, and I remember being just so kind of not impressed by this man. At that point, Dartmouth College was still 65-35 men to women. It was still very old boys. And I remember thinking why do we have Saul Bellow here talking to us when we could have had Jamaica Kincaid? It's a very odd thing that the two of them are thus linked in my mind. But still, I will go to the mat saying that I would far rather read Jamaica Kincaid than Saul Bellow. But the way I want to approach Jamaica Kincaid today is by reading the short story Girl. If you know anything about this short story, you will know that it came out in the New Yorker in 1978. So this is fairly early for her. We're going to walk through a very brief bio of her in 1 second. But the short story came out in 1978, and Annie John came out in 1985. Lucy was another short novel of hers that was actually serialized in the New Yorker in 1990. And what is so impressive, and I think what is kind of a standout element about this story, is that it is in many ways a prose poem. It's 650 words long, and it's in one paragraph. It is in fact one sentence. So it's a lot of phrases, and they're set off by semicolons, which obviously makes it feel very different than your average short story. I think in many ways it can be considered like a shorter piece of writing. I think today we might call it flash fiction, which is not a term that I love. That makes things seem light. This is anything but light. This is a piece of short fiction that is experimental in form, certainly, but it has all of the elements that we want in short fiction, which is why it is the perfect one to kick us off on this new endeavor. And for those of you who like a sense of what's going to happen, how we're going to move through a piece, I don't have an agenda for you exactly, but what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a very brief bio. We're going to talk about the title. Then I'm going to give you an overview of a couple of really important elements that I think are they're crucial, but I think that they can be overlooked to a certain extent. Then we're going to move through the piece. And as we do, of course, I'm going to have to interject all sorts of analysis because I will not be able to help myself. But then at the very end, I'm going to read the whole thing through so that you have this experience after having some of my thoughts in your head. You'll have the experience of hearing the whole piece in one go so that you really can savor what it is that Jamaica Kincaid is hoping that you will experience as a reader. Before we dig into this incredible piece of prose, I want to talk briefly about the biography of Jamaica Kincaid. She was born in 1944 in Antigua. Wikipedia tells us that her mother, importantly, it doesn't mention her father, but says that her mother was a literate, cultured woman, which is kind of, an interesting way to describe someone. It also is pointing to the fact that perhaps a lot of Antigua was not literate. At least that is my assumption. They also lived in what Wikipedia calls relative poverty. But it seems very clear in many different ways that Jamaica Kincaid was someone who read a lot and was very sort of educated. One of the things in her biography that's very important, both in terms of like the Wikipedia, but also in terms of things that she has written, things that she has said in different interviews, is that she was very close with her mother until when she was 9 years old. She had a stepfather at this point who was a carpenter. And when she was 9, her mother gave birth to her brothers in fairly quick succession, gave birth to these 3 boys. And suddenly things changed for Jamaica Kincaid. And actually, very importantly, she was not born at Jamaica Kincaid. That was a name that she took on, a nom de plume, a pen name. And very importantly, she herself said that taking on a name like that allowed her to do things that she wouldn't have been able to do with her given name. Her given name was Elaine Cynthia Potter Richardson. So when young Elaine was 9 years old, she has these 3 brothers, and suddenly her relationship with her mother shifts dramatically. They had been very close up until that point, and Kincaid herself made the point that they had the same amount of resources. Her stepfather was a carpenter, but they were now shared among, 6 people. And wow, I really had a hard time with that math there. They were shared among 6 people instead of 3 people. More importantly, she talked about how these material resources were diluted, but so were the emotional resources. She said that there was a dilution of emotional things, the good emotional things. She also said that what she got more of was cruelty and neglect. So these are obviously like very strong words, and these were in retrospect. So this is, adult person who is really thinking back on her childhood and understanding that this was a very momentous shift. When she was 16 years old, her mom sent her to the United States. She was in Scarsdale as an au pair. And essentially at that point, she cut ties with everyone in Antigua. She went to Framingham College and went to New York and had a lot of success, early on in terms of writing short fiction. She eventually married the son, his last name is Sean, the son of the editor of The New Yorker, and was again having success publishing pieces in The New Yorker in the 70s. So now we're going to dive into the piece itself. And, I was a little bit reticent about giving that biography because I think it's very important to be able to come to a piece of writing. Say you're leafing through the New Yorker and you come across this title. The title of the piece is Girl, and it looks relatively short. So you're like, oh, maybe I'm going to, stop and read this instead of just looking at the cartoons. And what's important is that you would read this without any of that biographical information. I mean, even if you knew who Jamaica Kincaid was, even if you had read, some of her novellas, you wouldn't have that background information. And I can tell you that it is very satisfying to read this piece of short prose, even if you don't have that information. That is the way that it happened for me. As I was looking for an appropriate short story, I came across this one, and I didn't know all of those biographical things about Kincaid until after I had, already read the piece. The piece is so powerful, and what's interesting to me is it has a huge amount to do with a mother-daughter relationship. So I mentioned before that it is only 650 words. It's one paragraph. In fact, it is one sentence. Another thing that is unique about it, it is in the second person. So we have talked here at the Foxed Page a lot about narrative stance, about whether something is told in the first person or the third person. And, we'll dig into is it omniscient third person? Is it a limited third person where you're moving from the, consciousness of one person to the next, but keeping some sort of objectivity, not using I did this and I did that. And usually when we talk about these things, they are typically third person or first person. It's very difficult to write a story in the second person. It's supremely difficult to write a whole novel in it. There was a book by Vendela Vida a long time ago that was in the second person. There's a book also by Italo Calvino that is also in the second person. I actually did not love that book, which maybe says something about the narrative stance. The way to think about the second person is that it is you. So first person is I, second person is you, third person is he or she. In that case of you do this and you do that, it's something, it feels to me kind of gimmicky and experimental and oftentimes is not super effective. One of the things about Girl that is interesting, though, is it is second person in the sense that it is the imperative. So this is a voice that is commanding someone to do something else. Because of the title, which we're about to dig into, You get the sense that this is someone giving directions to a girl, and fairly early on, because most of what we are talking about are things in the domestic sphere, you get a sense that it is an older woman who is talking about the daughter, and because of the investment and because of the suspicions on the part of this older woman, you get the sense that it is the mother. What's incredible is we have these constraints. It's short, it's in the second person, it's one sentence, it's all in the form of commands. But what eventually happens is we have a very satisfying experience of short fiction because we have a couple of complete arcs, which we're going to get to, which is incredible. I mean, 650 words and just commands, and to have like kind of a narrative through line is so impressive. I actually think a lot of people don't recognize that narrative through line, and to me, it is one of the strengths of the piece. Another strength of the piece we're just going to dive on in is the title. I love this title so much. So when you are thinking about a piece of short fiction, especially a very short one thing to recognize from the top is that it's almost, I mean, again, this is like a prose poem. It's almost like looking at a piece of poetry. When you have something that is this short, you better bet that, any writer worth her salt will have, edited and been very, very thoughtful about every single syllable, about how they're sounding, about their meaning, about the way that they are constructed and combined. Every single thing needs to be very carefully considered. And because of that, as the reader, one thing you can do is to almost think of the title as kind of like the first sentence of the short fiction. So in this case, girl is so effective because it's telling us a lot about who this person is, but it's also very general. So we know that it is a girl, but it's not the girl or a girl. So the girl obviously would be talking about one very specific girl. In this case, it is girl. We are talking about one girl, but also every girl. It is so smart. Because we also are thinking about this as the first word in a short story, you can almost think about this as a command in the sense of someone saying, girl, wash the white clothes on Monday. So the title is just genius. It is both conjuring one person and conjuring everyone else, but it also is a type of address. Another piece of the importance of this title, like the masterful nature of it, is the fact that this is a young girl who we know has begun menstruating, because very quickly we have this command to always soak her small cloths as soon as she takes them off, meaning like some sort of sanitary napkin type of thing. So this is someone who is a girl, but who is also on the cusp of womanhood. The other reason why that is important, and the fact that this is a girl who has begun menstruating, is because this is a piece of fiction that is profoundly interested in sex. And in terms of sex, mostly to do with the sort of judgment on the part of the mother. So it's really important that we're talking about girl, and there's this older woman who is overlaying her judgment and her scorn and all of these kinds of like negative feelings about sex onto this girl. So again, before we start reading, and I really am interjecting with all sorts of thoughts on, that are more granular, I want to speak briefly about a few of these overarching, sort of phenomena that are happening in this piece of short fiction that I think are so extraordinary. So the first thing is this voice of the mother. It is very clear, largely because we are in the domestic sphere, that this is a mother. What's important is that this mother's voice is very critical. From the very beginning, this is someone who is, evincing a fair amount of cruelty, just as Elaine or Jamaica Kincaid said about her younger self. The voice is also pretty patriarchal in the sense that what this woman is, she's giving all of these sort of domestic instructions, but as she is giving them, a lot of them are in service to men. At one point, too, and the gender stuff is very serious. Like throughout the whole entire thing, it's very clear that these are women doing, womanly things like setting tables and making food and doing laundry. Which is so fascinating because Jamaica Kincaid, I mean, I don't know like how much laundry and setting tables she was doing once she was, an acclaimed writer in the United States. But she is someone who at 16 moved to the United States as an au pair, went to college, had a very successful career in New York City. She was married. She has 2 children. I mean, she's someone who had a family, but also, as far as I can imagine, was really leading a very different sort of life than the one that the mother in this short fiction might have envisioned for her daughter. But it is very clear that the expectations are very much of a girl. At one point, she says, when you're playing marbles, don't squat. And the mother very explicitly says, you're not a boy, So there's this very clear, binary thing here where this is a girl she is talking about. The mother's voice is also very important in the sense that she's interrogating her daughter. There's this kind of like thread that goes through where she talks about singing Benna in church. We're going to talk more about that when we're reading the actual story. But Benna is this kind of pre-calypso music, and it's call and response. And it tends to be, in Wikipedia, they were talking about it being, gossipy or being somewhat suggestive. So we have the voice of the mother who is like interrogating the daughter about whether or not she is singing Benna. So what we are talking about there is the voice of the daughter. It's very important to note the ways that, like, even as we are hearing the voice of this disembodied mother, she's talking about the voice of the daughter doing some other speech act. In this case, singing this kind of ribald music, which underscores the importance of voice. So and crucially, we actually do hear the voice of the daughter. So there are a couple of times where in italics we have the voice of the daughter, and it is somewhat defiant in terms of the mother. It's so well done because it's subtle, but it's crucial that we are hearing both of the voices. The last thing to note is the grammar, the fact that we have a lot of semicolons and the fact that this is one paragraph. So those are obviously very clear things or things you notice right away, and they are crucial elements. It's important once we have identified elements like that to then ask ourselves, like, so what? Why is it important that this is all one sentence and that it is like this unrelenting paragraph? I just tipped you off. My sense is that that is important because you have this forward movement, this kind of inevitability and this kind of propulsion. This is a voice that is relentless. It's just going and going and going. And we do have the daughter at times trying to answer, trying to kind of interject. But this idea of the relentlessness, like you can't get a word in edgewise if you are the daughter. And the kind of like inescapability of this is really reinforced by this forward motion of the sentence just going on and on and on. There's nowhere for anyone to push against. I mean, there is, because the daughter at a couple of times does get a word in edgewise. But this is not dialogue. This is very much a voice of one person who is judging and who is demanding and who is making all sorts of assumptions. And it is this kind of relentless force, which is one of the main effects, I think, of the syntax, the grammar, this idea of it being one sentence with lots of semicolons, but also some em dashes, which is my favorite punctuation. But the grammar together with this one paragraph idea, all of that is speaking to the kind of propulsive kind of, inevitability, the relentlessness of the voice of this mother. But there is also this kind of sexual through line. So we have the mention of these small clods, which is like it's the fact that the young girl is menstruating. The importance of that is that she is now a woman. She's on the cusp of womanhood. She can procreate. Sexuality is coming to the fore, but is also very, threatening. The idea of becoming a slut is also important. Again, that's a word that is mentioned over and over. There's that idea of not being a boy. So really underscoring the fact that this is a girl and that as a girl, she is vulnerable. There's also an incredible thing where she talks about you should wash every day, even if it's only with your spit. So there's this idea of uncleanliness versus cleanliness. There's also a very important line about different types of medicine, but there's a medicine that you could use to throw away a child before it even becomes a child. So again, we're talking about sexuality as threatening an unwanted pregnancy. And in many ways, you're invited to think that this comes from experience. This is a type of medicine that this woman at least knows how to make for other people, perhaps has made for herself. It's very subtly opening up all of these different possibilities as we go. Also, crucially, this is a voice that is very aligned with the patriarchy, but in some ways it is a voice, especially toward the end, that we can read as like a very powerful feminine force. Not feminine, but like a very powerful womanly force. She talks about different ways that you can love a man, that she's essentially teaching her daughter different ways to love a man. To me, because these are like techniques that you could love a man with, my sense is that those are meant to be sexualized. Also because there's a lot of other sexualized stuff that we have been, accumulating as we work through. And there's this amazing line where she says, that you could try this, you could try that. If that doesn't work, and then she says, and if they don't work, don't feel too bad about giving up. So there's this idea of like having to serve men on some level, like, there being a patriarchy that you have to kind of, work with. But also like the idea of giving something up, there is an agency and a certain amount of power that this woman has that she is passing on to her daughter. So we have this really complex and very nuanced look at sex that goes all the way through. And again, it's this very brief 650 words, but you have this whole entire trajectory that is amazing. Also, the close of this short story is unbelievable. It is so good. That's a very good incentive to just go ahead and dive into the text itself. And very briefly, you might be thinking to yourself, like, it sounds like we've already discussed everything. But what I will show you, even in this very first opening of the thing, is that the language is incredible. This is like, I mean, yes, there are all these important things that are going on in terms of syntax and in terms of, the voice of the mother. But the actual writing itself, this is where it ends up feeling like a poem. It's just incredible. So here we go. Girl by Jamaica Kincaid. Wash the white clothes on Monday and put them on the stone heap. Wash the colored clothes on Tuesday and put them on the clothesline to dry. So very importantly, we haven't discussed this, and here I am interjecting after like 1 second. This is a piece of work that, again, if you came across this in the New Yorker and you did not know that Jamaica Kincaid was born in Antigua, you would be able to tell that we are in the tropics very early on, partially because of the food that they're talking about. But what's amazing is there are things that are uncommon to someone who grew up in, California. But because of either the choice of words or because of context clues, not only are they easy to understand, I mean, you don't perfectly understand them, like things like the stone heap. You don't understand them exactly, but you can imagine what they are. And in that imagining, you're sort of working to get yourself fully transported into a world. Again, you can't picture it perfectly, but these things are so evocative that you really have a sense of like heat and a sense of what things would feel like and how they would be different. Also of class, we're talking about putting, clothes out to dry, on a stone heap. Wash the colored clothes on Tuesday and put them on the clothesline to dry. Another quick detail there. She says the color clothes, not the colored clothes, which is maybe indicating that we're talking about someone who's not necessarily speaking American English at this point. Don't walk bareheaded in the hot sun. Cook pumpkin fritters in very hot sweet oil. Soak your little cloths right after you take them off. When buying cotton to make yourself a nice blouse, be sure that it doesn't have gum in it, because that way it won't hold up well after a wash. Soak saltfish overnight before you cook it. Is it true that you sing Benna in Sunday school? Couple of important things here. This is so nuanced that I think it is important to stop and take a look. We have this kind of alliteration that is happening. I am generally not a fan of alliteration, but it is subtle here and it is so powerful. It starts from the very beginning, wash the white clothes. So you have that repetition of the W sound. Here we have soak saltfish, which I love that because you have both of the sibilants, the soak, salt, and then you have the voiced sibilant, the fish, the SH sound. It's again, it kind of adds to this idea of like moving forward and momentum and propulsion and like the relentlessness of the whole thing. But the thing that's truly outstanding about this sentence is when she says, soak saltfish overnight before you cook it. We then move right into this question, is it true that you sing Benna in Sunday school? So you have this kind of mundane thing about something she should do domestically. And then we have this interrogation, we have this question. It's important that it's a question because each time we see this idea of singing Benna, it's slightly different. So an effective motif in anything, whether it's a novel or a poem or a piece of short fiction like this, you can't just repeat something over. I mean, you can repeat something over and over. And sometimes that's effective if in certain circumstances. But in this case, you want a subtle shift because you're trying to get this arc. You're trying to have this kind of evolution in this idea of singing Benna. So in the beginning, it's this question. Also, the fact that she's saying, is it true that you sing Benna in Sunday school? That is obviously indicating that the mother has heard a rumor and that she is clarifying with her child, but it's also speaking to the community-wide sense that you should not be doing that. It's also important that she is singing Benna not just anywhere, but in Sunday school. Again, you have that alliteration. You have it at the end of the phrase so that all of the kind of weight is on this idea of Sunday school. And you can imagine, we learn soon that singing Benna is not something that you would want to be doing in Sunday school. So we move on. Always eat your food in such a way that it won't turn someone else's stomach. So that's important too because we have the idea of eating something and the idea of turning someone's stomach right after singing Benna in Sunday school is important. It's this idea of like moving from this idea like, are you singing this untoward music? And then immediately saying, don't turn someone's stomach. So you have this very, just in proximity and in terms of how these things are piling up, the juxtaposition between them or the sort of fluid sense of them is all very important. Then she goes on Sundays, try to walk like a lady and not like the slut you are so bent on becoming. Don't sing Benna in Sunday school. So here we have her getting very explicit about this slut concept. And slut is such a hard word, but then we go immediately back into this idea of don't sing Benna in Sunday school. You mustn't speak to wharf rat boys, not even to give directions. Don't eat fruit on the street, flies will follow you. But I don't sing Benna on Sundays at all, and never in Sunday school. So that is italicized, and it is in the first person, obviously. So it's very clear that this is the daughter answering. And it's important that the thing the daughter is choosing to answer, well, also because the mother asked the question, but she's defending herself in terms of her sexuality because, and she's using her voice doubly in the sense that she is speaking back to her mother, but she's also saying, I use my voice at times to sing Benna, but I don't do it on Sunday, and I don't do it in Sunday school. So you have the voice talking about what the voice is doing elsewhere in a way that's underscoring the importance. I mean, I think it's pretty clear why a voice is important, and certainly voice in this kind of patriarchal, matriarchal situation. Okay, I'm going to move a little faster. 650 words has never felt so dense. So she says, but I don't sing Benna on Sundays at all, and never in Sunday school. And then we go back to Roman type, which is the voice of the mother. This is how to sew on a button. This is how to make a buttonhole for the button you have just sewed on. This is how to hem a dress when you see the hem coming down, and so to prevent yourself from looking like the slut I know you are so bent on becoming. This is how you iron your father's khaki shirt so that it doesn't have a crease. This is how you iron your father's khaki pants so they don't have a crease. This is how you grow okra far from the house because okra trees harbor red ants. When you're growing dasheen, make sure it gets plenty of water or else it makes your throat itch when you're eating it. So there's a lot of symbolism here that I'm not stopping and talking about, but the idea of a button, it brings up this idea of like things being buttoned up or like, button up or like sort of like button your lip. And the idea of things being sort of closed down. Also, there's a kind of a sexuality there about, a button moving through a buttonhole. There's a certain, it's very subtle, but there's a certain sexual overtone there. She goes on, this is how you sweep a corner. This is how you sweep a whole house. This is how you sweep a yard. This is how you smile to someone you don't like too much. This is how you smile to someone you don't like at all. This is how you smile to someone you like completely. So again, there is so much nuance here. We have this idea of the strength of someone. This is a woman who's saying, like, you may at times have to wear a mask of sorts, and this is how you do it. But there's also a sense of the full breadth of what this mother is capable of and what she's passing on to her daughter. This is how you set a table for tea. This is how you set a table for dinner. This is how you set a table for dinner with an important guest. This is how you set a table for lunch. This is how you set a table for breakfast. I loved that part because it speaks to just the domestic sphere and how women have these things that you have to do over and over. It's like unloading the dishwasher or folding laundry. Like every time I have to do those things, I'm like, this we're just going to have to do this again tomorrow. Like it's that kind of feudal thing that is important in some senses. Like it's keeping order and making people feel, safe. And it's also like making things efficient and convenient. But it is so thankless and it is so invisible. It's this kind of work that I love the way she's like, here's how you set the table and set the table and set the table and set the table. That monotony and that repetition and the meaninglessness, essentially, of that work is so clear. This is how to behave in the presence of men who don't know you very well. And this way they won't recognize immediately the slut I have warned you against becoming. Be sure to wash every day, even if it's with your own spit. Don't squat down to play marbles. You are not a boy, you know. Don't pick people's flowers. You might catch something. Don't throw stones at blackbirds because it might not be a blackbird at all. This is how to make a bread pudding. This is how to make ducona. This is how to make pepper pot. This is how to make a good medicine for a cold. This is how to make a good medicine to throw away a child before it even becomes a child. This is how to catch a fish. This is how to throw back a fish you don't like. And as we're reading through, it is striking me that so much of this stuff is really like begging to become metaphor. And it feels especially metaphorical because the idea of throwing away a fish you don't like is followed by this. This is how to throw back a fish you don't like, and that way something bad won't fall on you. This is how to bully a man. This is how a man bullies you. This is how to love a man. And if this doesn't work, there are other ways. And if they don't work, don't feel too bad about giving up. This is how to spit up in the air if you feel like it. And this is how to move so quick that it doesn't fall on you. This is how to make ends meet. Always squeeze the bread to make sure it's fresh. But what if the baker won't let me feel the bread? Clearly that is in italics. This is the other thing that the daughter is asking about. And one of the things here, again, this is like a somewhat sexualized kind of thing. It's this idea of like the tactile nature. It's the idea of feeling something to see whether it is soft or hard. Even the word squeeze, the squeeze part in some ways feels very suggestive. And what happens here at the end is we have the voice of the daughter, and then we have this incredible turn. It's like the whole thing concludes in this incredible way. So the daughter says, "But what if the baker won't let me feel the bread? You mean to say that after all, you are really going to be the kind of woman who the baker won't let near the bread?" I love it. I mean, it's not a happy ending in many ways, but we have the idea of you. So she's using you here and directly addressing the daughter instead of just commanding things. But she's also making like this crazy accusation to the child. Like, are you telling me that like all of these assumptions I'm making about you are actually going to come true? I love the fact that it's kind of unexpected and it's not very conclusive. She's not like saying, it's not like some big pronouncement about her life. She's putting everything into the idea of the worth of her daughter coming down to some kind of semi-arbitrary thing. And of course, it has to do with purity, and it has to do with sensuality, and it has to do with a man, the baker, who, it's not a huge figure of authority, but certainly a male one. And just the idea of the worth of her daughter. The ending is so excellent. Okay, so as promised, I'm going to read this last part. But before we do that, in case you're ready to sign off at this point, I will thank you for listening. And I also will thank you for giving me the opportunity to just really dive in. It was such an incredible experience. First of all, to select a story that was short enough, which was so fun. I'm not someone who reads a ton of short fiction, so it was really great to sort of sift through and really think about who the masters of the form are and which of their pieces is really something that we can really dig into in one sitting. For those of you who, want to hear the story one last time in its entirety without my interjections, here we go. Girl by Jamaica Kincaid. Wash the white clothes on Monday and put them on the stone heap. Wash the colored clothes on Tuesday and put them on the clothesline to dry. Don't walk bareheaded in the hot sun. Cook pumpkin fritters in very hot, sweet oil. Soak your little cloths right after you take them off. When buying cotton to make yourself a nice blouse, be sure that it doesn't have gum in it, because that way it won't hold up as well after a wash. Soak saltfish overnight before you cook it. Is it true that you sing Benna in Sunday school? Always eat your food in such a way that it won't turn someone else's stomach. On Sundays, try to walk like a lady and not like the slut you are so bent on becoming. Don't sing Benna in Sunday school. You mustn't speak to wharf rat boys, not even to give directions. Don't eat fruit on the street, flies will follow you. But I don't sing Benna on Sunday at all, and never in Sunday school. This is how to sew on a button. This is how to make a buttonhole for the button you have just sewed up. This is how to hem a dress when you see the hem coming down, and so to prevent yourself from looking like the slut I know you are bent on becoming. This is how you iron your father's khaki shirt so that it doesn't have a crease. This is how you iron your father's khaki pants so that they don't have a crease. This is how you grow okra, far from the house, because okra trees harbor red ants. When you are growing dasheen, make sure it gets plenty of water, or else it makes your throat itch when you are eating it. This is how you sweep a corner. This is how you sweep a whole house. This is how you sweep a yard. This is how you smile to someone you don't like too much. This is how you smile to someone you don't like at all. This is how you smile to someone you like completely. This is how you set a table for tea. This is how you set a table for dinner. This is how you set a table for dinner with an important guest. This is how you set a table for lunch. This is how you set a table for breakfast. This is how to behave in the presence of men who don't know you very well. And this way they won't recognize immediately the slut I have warned you against becoming. Be sure to wash every day, even if it is with your own spit. Don't squat down to play marbles. You are not a boy, you know. Don't pick people's flowers. You might catch something. Don't throw stones at blackbirds, because it might not be a blackbird at all. This is how to make a bread pudding. This is how to make ducona. This is how to make pepper pot. This is how to make a good medicine for a cold. This is how to make a good medicine to throw away a child before it even becomes a child. This is how to catch a fish. This is how to throw back a fish you don't like, and that way something bad won't fall on you. This is how to bully a man. This is how a man bullies you. This is how to love a man. And if this doesn't work, there are other ways. And if they don't work, don't feel too bad about giving up. This is how to spit up in the air if you feel like it, and this is how to move quick so that it doesn't fall on you. This is how to make ends meet. Always squeeze bread to make sure it's fresh. But what if the baker won't let me feel the bread? You mean to say, after all, that you really are going to be the kind of woman who the baker won't let near the bread. Unbelievable. So good. So, wow. Those of you who are still listening, these are true fans. These are the real diehards. So congratulate yourselves on really immersing yourself and, frankly, on really being a curious person who is interested in consuming what I think is an incredible piece of prose. So thank you very much for listening to the entire thing, and come back soon to listen to another short story. Happy reading.